The Weekly Hugh Demon. Full steam ahead.
Let's talk a little bit about Friedrich Nietzsche. I'm always hesitant to talk about Nietzsche because I view Nietzsche as kind of like you do the Book of Revelation. So you want to talk to someone about philosophy, and they say, "Yeah, I want to learn about philosophy. Let's read Nietzsche." It's like you don't start with Nietzsche. It's like people want to read the Bible for the first time. It's like, "Oh yeah, let's go to the Book of Revelation." Like Charlie Manson and the Beatles and whatever. It's like, no, you don't want to start with the Book of Revelation when you're just starting with the Bible. You don't want to start with Nietzsche when you're first starting with philosophy. In my case, I'm no Nietzsche scholar. I've read a fair amount by him, but mostly confined to a pair of readers I bought over the years and dipped into occasionally. But most of my knowledge comes from secondary sources, primarily the Drama of Atheist Humanism by Henri de Lubac. I'm probably butchering that name, but it's a phenomenal book. D-E space L-U-B-A-C, de Lubac. I actually had to order the book from Ignatius Press last week. I was dipping back into it, and I lost my first version. My first version was a copy. I'd gone down to Notre Dame and made a copy of it, on a copy machine, page by page, because it was out of print. But now it's back in print, but now I've lost my first copy. I don't know where it got to, so I'm really bummed out. Now, I was shocked, though, when I got the book from Ignatius Press last week, and it's over 500 pages long. I had no idea. I don't remember my book being that long, so I don't know if Ignatius Press put out like an expanded version or what, but anyway, it's a great book, and that is probably half my knowledge of Nietzsche comes from that book alone, and then the other half just comes from things I've picked up over the years. But Nietzsche had a special ire for Christianity. He really attacked a thing called slave morality, and that's what I want to focus on today, at least in the first part of this lecture, his whole animosity towards slave morality. And it basically goes something like this. You're slower than a retarded turtle. Well, you tell yourself, that's okay, the last will be first. That's the type of thing Nietzsche hated. So you're a failure at every business you started and you can't hold down a job. It's like, well, blessed are the poor. You get pushed around, you can't stand up for yourself, well, the meek will inherit the earth. That's what Nietzsche hated. He said people they embrace the slave morality because they're losers. He goes, even worse, because most people are losers, they impose that slave morality on the rest of society. So the winners out there, the rabbits who crush the tortoise, the strong, the powerful, he goes, they actually bring themselves down a notch or two in order to accommodate the slave morality, because they buy into it at some level, because so many other people are buying into it, because most people are losers. That's what Nietzsche absolutely detested. He basically called slave morality a type of narcotic. When you boil it all down, what Nietzsche is really attacking is a thing called detachment. And if you've been listening to this podcast all along, that's one of my favorite topics, detachment. But Nietzsche, he has a warped view of attachment. And I'm going to warn you, this is kind of subtle, kind of delicate when you start trying to examine detachment and how Nietzsche looked at it. Well, just when you look at detachment in general, what you're doing in detachment is you have the subject and the object. And by shrinking the subject, shrinking your ego, you better appreciate the object. That's the essence of detachment. And when you're looking at that interplay between subject and object, it gets really subtle. It gets a bit tricky. I believe that, when it comes to the overall reasoning process, you use the faculty of reason on yourself. What am I going through? What am I thinking? Trying to analyze your own thoughts. And you can use it on the object, through science or whatever. But that gap between, I've talked about the existential gap, between subject and object. When you're in that area, things kind of fade from one to the other and reason becomes problematical. I think you're kind of leaving the proper realms of reason. And I don't think Nietzsche had much appreciation for that type of subtlety. For Nietzsche, detachment is slave morality. He goes, plus it is just a narcotic. It's a psychological trick. So in his word, according to one person I was listening to about Nietzsche, Nietzsche said, great, so you've numbed yourself. You've turned off the outside world to the extent that you can watch your own son get slaughtered and not be affected by it. He goes, because Nietzsche acknowledged the world is full of pain. You're going to go through painful episodes in your life. Nietzsche, by the way, said, well, then embrace it. Embrace the pain and make yourself stronger. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. He goes, embrace it. Increase your power. He goes, don't numb yourself to pain like that. Embrace the pain. And he said, furthermore, by just numbing yourself like a narcotic, so you're not affected when you see your son slaughtered in front of you. By the same token, you're not affected when you see your newborn son smile at you. And he's like, what type of life is that? You're not enjoying anything anymore. Nothing gratifies you anymore. He goes, that's horrible. And the response is, yeah, he's freaking right. What Nietzsche couldn't appreciate was he is describing what's probably called apatheia. It's spelled variously, but it's like apathy, but apatheia, A-P-A-T-H-E-A or E-I-A or whatever how they pronounce it. And close related to Roman Stoicism. We just kind of shut down. And it's almost like you're holding the outside world in contempt. Nothing, enters your fortress, your inner fortress. The Simon and Garfunkel song, I am a rock, I am an island. Nothing comes in. But that's not detachment. I think Nietzsche thought that was detachment, but that's not detachment. Again, detachment is shrinking the self to better appreciate the object. And I think I can prove this, actually, by Nietzsche himself. Because for Nietzsche, Christianity was only one of two great narcotics in Western civilization. The second narcotic was alcohol. I mean, if he hated anything more than Christian morality or what he called slave morality, he hated alcohol. He said that numbs us, basically numbs us to our greatness. It interferes with our ambitions. He goes, you drink alcohol when you're happy, you drink alcohol when you're sad, you're always drinking alcohol. He goes, that itself is a narcotic. He apparently detested it and thought it was a sign of great weakness. Well, to me, it's like, yeah, that's because you don't understand detachment. By his condemnation of alcohol, he himself condemned himself as being very short-sighted or having very shallow, actually no comprehension at all about proper detachment. Because again, in Nietzsche's world, it's all subjects, it's all ego, it's all advancing the self, becoming the Superman, whatever it is. You advance your power, and others like you will increase your power, overcoming the slave morality, and take the world to the next level type thing. It's all about ego, power, the will to power. Well, drinking doesn't really further that, and he's right about that. But what he doesn't appreciate is shrinking the self comes with drinking. And I've mentioned many times, when you have a few drinks, you shrink the ego inside you. And I'm talking a few drinks, okay? I don't know how many, 2, 10, I don't know. Each person's different. But you're shrinking the self. As you shrink the self, you can better look out and appreciate God's creation. And everything God created is good. So, as you shrink the self, you look out and you see things as they really are. You see things as good. You feel thankful that so many things are good. And again, don't take my word for it. Go out and have a few and test it yourself. Go out and have a few by yourself and test it yourself. The idea of drinking alone being a sign of a problem, I don't buy it. I mean, obviously it can be. I mean, sure. But to sit back and just have a few drinks on the front porch and to sit back and say, damn, things are all right after all. That's you seeing things, seeing reality with your ego shrunk, and you see things as they really are. The paradoxical saying I like is, when I'm drunk, I'm sober. So when I'm drinking, I can see things as they really are, not refracted through my twisted ego, through the worries of day-to-day life, which really, when it boils down, all those things are all just worried about yourself, how things are going to affect you. Anytime you worry, by the way, that is only because your ego is so inflated. So everything comes through your ego, gets all warped, and because you're thinking how this is going to affect me, or this might go wrong, or, whatever, and it's going to result in pain for me. You need to shrink that ego, and then the worry stops. Just like when you're drinking, you shrink the ego and the worrying stops. Again, I can't go out there and give you a scientific test. Go open a couple bottles of beer and try it out yourself. I think you agree with me. And honestly, anyone who's drank knows what I'm talking about, especially adults. Not saying there aren't problem drinkers out there. There obviously are, but in healthy forms of drinking, that's exactly why it's healthy. I want to do like a little addendum to that last section about Nietzsche. You know, what it all boils down to, it, in my opinion, Nietzsche didn't have a healthy respect for the subject-object. I think his whole worldview can be boiled down into two fundamental facts for him. One, it's all subject. You know, objects exist only to gratify the subject. To him, it's all about power and becoming stronger and exerting your will. And once you can do those things, once you are rich in the conventional sense, not rich because you're content with what you have, but rich because you have a lot of crap. You know, you have the yacht, you have all that. Once you've exerted your power and you've actually become rich and powerful, famous, whatever it is, you can then grab the objects and better appreciate them. So it wasn't like he denied the objects, but he denied the objects any objective value. In a way, he's like, they're only valuable to the extent that they gratify the self. That was one way I think he kind of a stilted view of existence. He also had a stilted view because he didn't have that, what Eric Vogel would call the divine tension. Vogel would teach that the greatest thinkers from Soul on down the line had this transcendental sense, you know, divinity, spirit, whatever you want to call it, and then immanent, I-M-M-A-N-E-N-T, immanent, earthly, mundane. He goes, the greatest thinkers lived in this tension between the earthly and the divine, or the immanent and the transcendence, how Vogel put it. And Nietzsche was like all immanent, all earth, all the time. So he's like all earth, all power, all earth, all subject. That was kind of Nietzsche's worldview. And this, I really think you can go back to what I talked about last week about the maniac. You know, I think Nietzsche was kind of a maniac. I mean, he went mad at the end of his life, obviously. But, you know, he kind of lived this in that little box. He was a relentless reasoner. And again, as I mentioned, I think reasoning is properly confined to subject and object. You can do either one. Which, let's face it, that's like our entire existence, subject and object. But you have that existential gap where you're kind of bleeding one into the other. Where things, you know, you're fading one into the other. When you get in that, things get pretty hazy. Things aren't necessarily reasonable, so to speak. And in this, I'm fascinated by the fact that Nietzsche became wildly popular shortly after his death in 1900. In the 1950s, the thought of a Zen philosopher named D.T. Suzuki, he had a heavy influence on Thomas Merton. In the 1950s, his works really started taking off. And appreciate the connection there is, yet you have to understand that a lot of, I don't know what you call them, sociologists, or I'm not sure what you call them, but people who have looked at the impact of great thinkers on culture have identified 50 years as being the gap time. You know, so a great book is written in 1950 that kind of changes how we look at everything. It's going to take about 50 years for that really to hit the culture, really sink in. You know, it goes into the, you know, the upper echelons, the universities, then it's kind of the upper crust, then it hits the middle brow, and then it kind of hits the masses, and it really starts having a big impact. 50 years is often identified as how long that process takes. I think it's significant that D.T. Suzuki started picking up steam almost precisely 50 years after Nietzsche. And D.T. Suzuki, for him, Zen, and most people think, he is the master, although, by the way, some people think D.T. Suzuki got it wrong, but no matter. He was nominated for the Nobel in 1963 for a reason. I mean, he is the voice of Zen in the West, and he definitely ascribed to the view, and I think most Zen practitioners do, is you gotta suspend the subject-object. You have to enter the existential gap between subject and object. That is the Zen mode. That is an irrational mode of being. I don't want to say mode of thought, because thought, implies discursive reasoning. You're thinking about it. And Zen is all about getting past that. I mentioned a couple podcasts ago, the Zen master who would slap his students and perfected the yell, in your face, trying to shake you out of, the reasoning process. They always want to shake you out of that. They want you to leave the subject object and enter this existential gap where reason has no place. I think when you have someone like Nietzsche just ramming the crap out of, reason and about the subject and grabbing the object to gratify the subject, I think at some level, as Nietzsche's thought starts to pervade and becomes more popular, and because it's so wrong-headed, because it misses this whole divine, earthly tension, transcendent, immanent, it misses this whole subtle interplay between subject-object. To me, it's like the West was ready. The West was ready for a different way of thinking, looking at things, a different way of being. And I think maybe that's why Zen became so popular in the 1950s. Now, I'm totally making that up. I'm not making up all the facts. Nietzsche died in 1900, became wildly popular shortly thereafter. D.T. Suzuki reached popularity in the 1950s. The 50-year thing, I'm not making up any of that, but putting those pieces together and just speculating on what happened here in the West, why Zen became so popular, it does make you kind of wonder. No doubt there are lots of other factors at play as well. I'm not denying that, but I wouldn't be surprised if the mad German philosopher had something to do with it. Let's do some lightning segments. Rest in peace, Franco Columbo. If you don't know who Franco Columbo is, he was like the weightlifting god of the 1970s. He was, I think, Arnold Schwarzenegger's primary competitor in bodybuilding competitions. Schwarzenegger called Columbo the strongest man he'd ever met. Columbo was Schwarzenegger's best man when he married Maria Shriver. Schwarzenegger thought the world of him. When Columbo died, vacationing in Italy. Actually, he's from Sardinia. He was back there vacationing. He got ill and just died. I think it was his late 70s. I actually heard about it from Bill Burr. Bill Burr said he went to Columbo as a chiropractor. Bill Burr said, I had some shoulder problems. He goes, I swear this guy looked at me and knew it was wrong and fixed it. I was a big Franco Columbo fan because I was in high school at age 14, 5'2", weighing 105 pounds. And the doctor told my mom, he's just always going to be a slight person. His bone structure is fine. He's just a small person, just in general. And I wasn't having any of it. So I went and bought a bodybuilding book or a weightlifting book. And it turned out to be by Franco Columbo. Turns out I was really steered well. It was a blind purchase. I remember that. I just went to the bookstore, grabbed one. Turned out that I got really lucky because it was first rate. Franco Columbo had very sane, good advice about, not bodybuilding. He's really just more into weightlifting. He himself was a great power lifter. I think he won a powerlifting championship at one point. And I got really lucky to stumble across that book. I'm freaking ripped today. No, but it did help me a lot. I mean, I definitely was able to put on a lot of pounds and a lot of weight in mostly good ways until the middle age shift started. I'm going to say it. Stranger Things sucks. I can't believe how freaking popular that show is. Now I get it. I liked the first season. I wasn't blown away by it, but I really did enjoy it. I was blown away by American Vandal. Not blown away by the first season of Stranger Things. But my whole family watched it together. It's a family thing, so what the hey. Second season, I do the same thing. Watch it with the kids who are still at home. And it's like, it wasn't nearly as good as the first season. But, whatever. There's some quote-unquote family time in front of the TV. Gives us something to talk about. So then we sit down and start watching the first 2 episodes of season 3. Those were possibly the 2 worst TV shows in the history of mankind. They were absolutely freaking awful. And everyone I talked to, my kids, nephews, I was like, oh yeah, but when you get past those 2, those 2 really were bad, but when you get through the rest of the season, it really got to be really, really good. And, I'm not buying it. No, I ain't buying it because I didn't watch anymore. And so I really can't judge the rest of them. But to me, those first 2 shows were so abjectly awful, it tells me that the producers couldn't have done anything good later. If you had put two miserable pieces of crap like that out for the public to see, I don't think you can produce anything great, anything really worthy. It's like, well, this guy's a child molester, but he's a great guy otherwise. It's like, no. If you're the type of person who molests children, I don't care how much you're donating to charity, what you're doing, you're a awful person. You're not capable of being a good person if you're molesting children. If you produce two shows that are as freaking bad as those first two episodes, I refuse to believe that you're capable of producing anything truly good. I'm told I'm wrong, but yeah, I'm not going to find out. I'm not going to waste any more time with Stranger Things. You know, it reminds me of a quote that got some airtime recently. An HBO executive was quoted as saying, "We need hours a day of people's attention." You know, I don't know how to reply to that other than I'd urge all of you, don't go for it. Don't watch crap like Stranger Things. I believe this is a golden age of television. There's a book, a stupid book, but it has a couple good points called something like How TV is Making Us Smart or something like that. And it basically points out with the coming of Hill Street Blues, you had a type of TV show that would follow. It wasn't linear. It wasn't just, point A to point Z. With the coming of Hill Street Blues, you would have like 3 or 4 storylines going at the same time, jumping back and forth, and that took more concentration. But that broke the mold. For the first time, TV shows went from just being like a linear plot line A to Z to having 4 plot lines going at the same time, and then they start interacting. Seinfeld took it to a comedic level, having like 3 or 4 plot lines, all funny, but then tying them together at the very end to create like an overall punchline. And I think what we're seeing now, with the coming of Sopranos, you're just seeing the perfection of this type of production. And the number of shows out there are just phenomenal. Marie and I went through last night. There are 4 shows that we started watching we haven't gotten through yet. Dexter, Bosch, The Boys, and Friday Night Lights. You probably never will get through all of them. And I guess that's okay, but there's just so much good stuff out there to watch. You gotta try not to become what the HBO executive wants you to be. You don't need to waste, or you shouldn't be wasting hours a day on television. And again, it's tough because there is first-rate stuff out there. I mean, I started watching Sons of Anarchy, just loved it. But again, there are only so many hours in a day, and I don't want to devote more than 30 of them, 30 minutes, I should say, not 30 hours. I don't want to devote more than 30 minutes a day to TV. It's basically when I do my back exercises, or if I'm home by myself, eating dinner by myself, I'll watch TV. So I don't have to tell you, and this is like being asked not to bang a beautiful woman, because there's some beautiful TV shows out there, and there are a ton of them, and they all want you viewing stud. They want you watching them. So good luck with that, but again, I'd urge you, TV is what TV is. If you're watching much more than an hour a day, I'd really make a strong argument you're wasting your life. And you only have so many years in this vale of tears, so you really are called upon to make the most of them. I mean, no matter what life calls you to be, or no matter what your ethics or religious background is, I think we can all agree that, hey, 70, 80 years isn't much time, and you shouldn't be wasting it. And TV is definitely wasting it. Brussels sprouts gin. I guess some distillery in Scotland has come up with this. It just sounds awful. Not as a practical matter, I think when you go through the distilling process, the background taste is really, really faint. But that's just yikes. That just sounds awful. But if you want a taste and experience, I guess go to Scotland and buy some of that gin. Hey, the New Yorker had a real interesting piece about a guy who was supposed to write Prince's autobiography, ghostwrite Prince's autobiography, and he just basically goes through meeting Prince and why the book didn't come together. Prince died. But it reminds me, I actually had a friend who was a roadie for a summer. I think for a year he was a roadie for Prince. And he basically said Prince was, well, I think Prince is a genius. He really does. He goes, but he really was first and foremost just a prick. I mean, just extremely arrogant, very aloof, wanted nothing to do with anyone. His girlfriend, Sheila E. at the time, my friend said was gorgeous and a heck of a lot of fun. Went out to the bars with the roadies and the group all the time. But Prince himself didn't drink, always kept to himself. Hey, I talked about Mackinac Island 2 episodes ago. Just found out that it is the 5th most violent place in Michigan. It's ahead of places like Flint. It's due to a statistical anomaly. Basically, the crime stats say there are 16.7 incidents of violent crime in Mackinac Island per 1,000 people. Well, what it doesn't reflect is Mackinac Island only has 479 year-round residents. So, and the crime's coming from like the college students who work there during the summer. There are 2 sexual assaults, and I gotta believe it has to do with these like barracks all these college kids live in during the summer, working these long hours in the tourist industry. And there's 6 aggravated assaults, which not real surprising. I mean, I think Mackinac Island's gotta be up near the top of number of bars per capita. You're looking at 479 people. They must have, 5 or 6 bars, which gives it a very heavy bar presence, per person. Obviously, the statistics don't account for the fact that they bring in 10 to 15,000 people a day in tourists, so. Yeah, I mentioned last week I had some other issues with white privilege that are a little bit easier to understand. And I'm going to address a couple of them. These are triggered by this annoying, smug placard that a friend of mine sent to me suggesting I comment on white privilege. I'm just going to read you part of it. It says, I want my friends to understand that staying out of politics or being sick of politics is privilege in action. Your privilege allows you to live a non-political existence. And it goes on and on. And it says, other people they're fighting for their lives. And you might not see it, but that's what privilege does. So, and again, it's annoying, it's tiresome. I recount last week about, the gist of the problem with this whole white privilege concept. By feeding everything through that narrow worldview of white privilege, and you stay in that little box, it's hard to penetrate and explain to them why they're freaking wrong. Everything just leads back. And in that sense, it's like a conspiracy theorist or the reasoning of G.K. Cheson's Maniac. But again, go back and listen to last week's episode. I'm going to take issue with a couple more, I'd say, easier things to understand. First off, the woman holding that card, and the reason I know it's a woman, by the way, is it had like a website, and it's something like whitemama.org or some crap like that. I don't know, but something mama. But it's white. It's a white hand. It's like she's holding it up, so, what she's basically saying is, well, I get it. I'm white, but I get white privilege. I'm woke. And I'm one of the knowledgeable. That's just ridiculous. I mean, by saying, well, okay, I'm white, but I get it. Therefore, I'm with the people who are fighting against white privilege. To say that you get it, you're woke, that's nothing more than saying, well, I'm right and you're wrong. I mean, there's nothing there than just putting your hands over your ears and saying, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. By saying, well, I get it, I'm on the inside, I have the knowledge, that says nothing. That's just saying, I'm right. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. You're not getting anywhere. So keep that in mind. The people who claim this special form of woke knowledge, by the way, they're closely related to Gnosticism. I'm going to flush that out probably in a year or two. I'm just fascinated by the overlap here between these social justice warriors and always a cutting edge of thought. And I use thought with quotes. They claim the special knowledge or insight. It's really disturbing, with a lot of parallels throughout history. Okay, so the second point. Being non-political like I am, that's not because I'm privileged. It's because I don't trust politics, you dingbat. And again, I get it. Some people may not have this type of approach like mine, but, I'm kind of getting like Albert J. Nock. My view is if I want to improve things, I just need to improve myself. By improving the one unit I can really control, I make society a better thing. And that's really the proper scope of my ambition when it comes to helping other people. just making myself the best version of itself it can be. And furthermore, I don't trust politics. So yes, okay, fine. The blacks and the Mexicans, people who are not privileged, don't have the white privilege, they're fighting for their lives. And again, I don't buy that for a lot of different reasons. But let's say it's true. Going to politics isn't going to help matters. I mean, if you're fighting for your lives, it's probably because someone's oppressing you, and that's only with the consent of the government. So the government's already not doing its job. And then you want to use political means to address political problems. That's like the pacifist who beats his son because he wants to instill pacifism in him. It's like, yeah, I get why there's some legitimacy to that. So, you're a pacifist and your young son is, beating up other kids. And so you spank him or use corporal punishment to make him stop because you want him to be a pacifist. You want him to be peaceful. There's a lot of irony there. And I get it. You could say, well, sometimes even the pacifist has to use force, when it comes like the uninformed or the immature or whatever. And I'm not saying it's entirely inconsistent, but there's a lot of irony there. And here you are discontented with the way things are. Therefore, you want to use politics and set it aside. It's like you're using violence to adjust violence. Gandhi said you can't do that. I think even Martin Luther King said don't do that. But that's exactly what you're doing here. And it's ironic and I don't buy it. I think we need to shrink the political to get rid of the violence. Third thing, the left in the past couple of years has always painted the right as like the politics of hate. They hate gay marriage, I hate this, hate that. Well, what's that woman saying in that placard? She is saying, I appreciate you guys want to be political because you're content with the way things are. And to some extent that's true, although I'm not. I just distrusts our ability to make things any better. But let's say I am. Okay, fine. Yeah, I'm content with the way things are. What is contentment? That's just happiness. That's just a peace with the way things are. How can you say that we're content with the way things are, but yet we're the politics of hate? This just can't be. And the left, the revolutionaries, have always been the politics of hate. And going back to the French Revolution, it wasn't a coincidence that the revolutionaries turned to the guillotine, and that they're always violent. And that's not because they were oppressed. That's just because they were angry. And maybe they're angry because they were oppressed. They're intertwined. I'm not denying that. But you can never, ever be on the revolutionary side for the reasons she kind of sets forth in her little placard. If you're on the revolutionary, you're pushing for change, that's because you're discontent, you're filled with anger, you're filled with hate. Don't paint your opponents as being content with the way things are because they're filled with hate. That makes no sense whatsoever. And this is not saying you're even wrong. I think you are wrong for a lot of different reasons. All I'm saying is you're being illogical. You're not thinking it through. By painting people who are content with the way things are as being filled with hate, and saying you're not filled with hate, this doesn't make sense. Yours is a politics of hatred. You are filled with anger, and you see this over and over again. And if you want great cinematic expression of this, go to Forrest Gump when he's talking to the Black Panthers. That's freaking hilarious, and I think it's dead on. It really captures just the overall hate of revolutionaries and people on the left. Not all of them. I think you have some peace and love type people, but overall, it's consistently for the past 200 or 300 years been filled with people who have this existential just hatred for the way things are. And it is the politics of hate. And to paint the right or the conservatives or people who are non-political, who are content with the way things are, or like me, maybe not content with the way things are, but content that there's not a whole lot we can do to make them better, because by trying to make them better, we empower the government, which by its nature makes things worse as a general rule when it gets too big, when it gets beyond the local level. By painting those people as the ones of hate, it's just downright historically and existentially laughable. Alright, that's a wrap for this week. Please follow us on Twitter, check out the Facebook page, go to the blog, check out youdemonpodcast.com. There's all sorts of information over there that you might find interesting. As always, thanks for listening.